There we go. This is on how purposeful play can unlock hidden potential and creativity. It's for members of all three of our networks. We're recording the session, as I say, and welcome to Pauline and Suki from Playfield. The plan for today is to let Pauline and Suki have a run at this for about 15-20 minutes, something like that, and then we're going to go into a breakout room, reflect on some of the things we've heard. They've got some questions for you, which are really excellent questions, and then we'll come back with a bit of a Q&A debate in the round with a half finish at 12:45. So please put yourself on mute now if you would. Pauline, feel free to share your slides whenever you're ready. Pauline and Suki, over to you. Thanks a lot for doing this. Much appreciated.
Thank you to be here.
Thank you. Here we go.
Oh, so slick, Pauline. So slick.
It worked. First hurdle over. So thank you everyone for having us. And so yes, as Rich said, we're talking about how purposeful play can unlock hidden potential and creativity. And the first thing I'm going to do is kind of ask you to I'm going to start with a question, and I want you to be honest with yourself about your initial gut response. Are internal auditors creative? We won't be asking you to share, but I'd really love you to kind of note your response and reflect on that as we go through our exploration today. Our perspective is that, like, everyone is creative, but not all creativity is currently recognised and valued in most workplaces. And everyone's creativity is needed to navigate change in a resilient way. And also the evidence for play being a pathway to creativity is compelling. But do you talk about play at work? Our research and exploration so far points that play does have an image problem. And we're inviting people to rethink this seemingly simple word. And after our exploration and reflection today, we're kind of inviting everyone to celebrate all types of creativity in the workplace and create that play-filled environment to foster it. Because creativity is a kind of a wonderfully diverse human capability. And why do this? Well, we see the benefits of play and creativity being really compelling. You can engage individuals through intrinsic motivation and recognition. You can unlock the innovation that you need to adapt to the future of work. And, you know, also create this environment in which people thrive, not just survive through change.
So why are we talking about creativity, and why is now really the time? So creativity has always been important to an extent to any organisation, but given the level of kind of continuous complex changes that we're navigating as part of this growing question around the future of work, creativity is now needed more than ever to think through these questions. Now, I won't go through the key trends because you'll all be far more familiar with them and living and breathing them than I will be, but they really do set the context for our discussion today around the growing role of technology and data, the shift to being purpose-led as organisations, changing expectations around work, and of course, the debate around the office and how and where we do our work. All of these big questions pre-existed the pandemic, but COVID-19 has really heightened them and created a sense of urgency. So to help navigate this level of very complex, ongoing change, we really need to be resilient. And resilience is one of those words that I think is in danger now of becoming a bit overused. It's bandied about every single day, and we're all probably a bit sick of it. But we really think about it in a very holistic, kind of human-centered way. And we think about it here, as you can see on the slide, resilience is being in a state to positively embrace change and adapt in order to thrive, not just survive over the long term. And I just want to pick out that word adapt there because we really think it's linked to the need for creativity. So for us to adapt, we need space, we need some flexibility, we need freedom to experiment, knowing that some things will work and others definitely won't work, and being able to kind of get comfortable with that. The same conditions are needed for creativity. So the more creative we are, the more we are able to adapt and therefore be resilient as we navigate these changes. And the changes that we are required to think about to really thrive in this future of work that we're thinking about needs us to change how we think about people, how we think about processes, and how we think about systems. So we can't just look to build resilience at one level, for example, at the level of the individual, often couched in terms of well-being initiatives, which we've seen a lot of over the last year. We also can't think about resilience only at the team level or even only at the organizational level. It really needs a harmonized approach across all three levels for it to bed in. After all, there is no such thing as an organization. It's just a collection of individuals or a team of teams around a common purpose. And in this chain, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And because the future of work changes are so wide-ranging and impactful, not just on our work, but on our lives more generally, everyone needs to be involved in changing how we work. There's no future of work unless it's designed and developed by everyone with a role to play. So it can't just be the domain of a few creative thinkers or creative people that we think has this magic dust of creativity. It's not a time for tweaking things around the edges. It's time for really kind of radically rethinking, what is creativity? Who has it? Who doesn't? What is its role in our work to help us bring about individual and collective success?
So this kind of idea of creative, it can be a label that we use for certain people, and typically it's highly desired. And often people themselves count themselves as either creative or not creative. But to create is a natural human capability. But like all things human, it's naturally diverse as a result. And so we think it's not about who is creative or not, but what types of creativity exist and are valued in the workplace. And so creativity is a capability that can be honed by everyone. And in fact, mathematician and a creativity scholar, Ruth Noller, has devised this formula on the factors that contribute to creativity. With the K being representing the knowledge that you need, I being the imagination required, E being the kind of the capability for an open-minded evaluation of the ideas that emerge, and the A being the powerful influence of attitude, either positively or negatively influencing. And you can think how that label of I'm creative or not creative could influence how someone feels about their attitude and capability for creativity. But here's another simple dictionary definition of creativity, where you'll see again that the role of imagination is at the heart of creativity. We also think it's really interesting to explore that it's about creating something without restriction on what that could be. And so, like a lot of things in life, we see creativity existing on a spectrum. There's obviously a lot of focus on breakthrough innovation at the far right of the scale, if you like a rethink of traditional business models to compete with technology-first startups. But there is also adaptation taking place in your workplace already, every day. And this creativity is needed too. Just like my internal audit team, redesigning processes and reporting to make them more efficient and user-friendly. Putting aside the debate of whether you think an internal audit report can actually be user-friendly ever. And another way of thinking about it is about creativity is to think of tangible versus intangible. Again, it broadens our perspectives. So for example, depending on the nature of your business, you may produce tangible products like furniture, or be selling intangible services like change. You also may have tangible office, whatever that means, environments where the work is done. And then you also have people constantly creating an intangible culture, environment in which the work is done through their behaviours and the relationships that they create. So as Zuki touched on earlier, we really do need to reimagine the fabric of work, and everyone has to be involved, including your internal auditors. But do we really truly value all types of creativity? And do we invite all types of creativity from all people? I'm curious about whether within workplaces, and what I've seen, about this inbuilt judgment we might have about where the good creative ideas will come from.
Okay, so let's spend a few minutes now thinking about play and work. Often they've been existing in opposition to each other, a sort of unhappy pairing with a lot of tension there. So let's try and unpack the idea of what play at work can look and feel like. So we know we need more creativity in our workplaces, and play can be our pathway to that creativity. And our work at Playfield is built on decades of research on the benefits of play for adults in the workplace and its relationship to creativity. And there's a lovely quote here just that sums it up for us, which is that not all play is creative, but that more often than not, creativity is born out of some form or moment of play. So it doesn't always need to look and feel creative, but play, as we'll see shortly, helps to create the conditions that we need for creativity to flourish. Now, a quick question for you just to reflect on. Again, won't be sharing our answers, but just pause and try and think of, when are you at your most imaginative? The chances are, when you're feeling imaginative, you're probably feeling some of these things: relaxed, confident, motivated, safe, or perhaps inspired. So these are the conditions needed to increase the level of creativity we see in people. And interestingly, this environment of these conditions is what happens, what is created by us when we are in a state of play as people. Now, excitingly, just as creativity is diverse, to Pauline's point, so is play. It doesn't just mean one thing, and it doesn't just look like one thing. It's one of those words that we kind of hear all the time as very simple, but it can mean different things to different people, and it can bring up connotations for people. So we like to keep it really simple and define play as any activity that we deeply enjoy doing. It's voluntary. No one can tell you to play, only you know when you're playing. It helps you get into a state of flow when you lose sense of time, and it always has a purpose. Traditionally, we've been told that play is purposeless. It's only to feel good, it's only to have fun. Well, firstly, we'd argue that's a purpose in and of itself. But secondly, where we're really fascinated is that play can have a purpose. You can have an outcome or a goal that you're working on, either yourself or in a team, but you can do that in a way that feels more like play to those individuals. So how might play look at work? Let's get kind of thinking about this, because it can all feel a bit nebulous sometimes. The first way we can think about play at work is in terms of the environment. So there are some workspaces that are very stereotypically playful. And of course, Google typically jumps front of the queue for this in terms of ball pits and slides. That's one idea of play, and it'll be play for some people and not for others. But that's the kind of stereotypical playful environment. But there are other environments that don't need kind of bean bags and ping pong tables that can still invite a sense of playfulness. Or we can think about specific experiences. And I know we have a lovely advocate in the room, but we're talking here about things like Lego Serious Play, or perhaps an improvisation workshop, where you bring those practitioners into your organization to help think through a particular business problem or opportunity you have. So you're using play for a specific purpose. The third area is in behaviors. So the kind of culture that you're building in the firm, where perhaps a sense of lightness, humor is encouraged, and how people interact with each other. And the last area, which is where we really like to play, no pun intended, is thinking about at play in the act of the work itself. So in the fabric of what you do, what your role involves, what tasks you need to do, how much that can align to what play is for you. For example, programming here for a coder. So let's dig a bit more into the different ways that people can play. Now, again, our work is built very heavily on a Dr. Stuart Brown, who uncovered in his research 8 kind of key archetypes of play preferences, which you can see the icons there on the screen. We'll talk more about those in a moment, but we often find a good place to start is in holding this question, reflecting on this question for yourself. What feels like play to you, but looks like work to others? And sometimes what can be helpful is thinking about play, not in terms of particular activities, but in terms of verbs. So things like creating, moving, competing, entertaining, curating, So these aren't, you're not saying, I just like football. There's a sense of the movement is what you love. You also like moving in other ways. So it's the underlying verb. That's how we think about play and the kind of verbs. And when we think about all those changings that we're navigating as part of the future of work, which verbs, which kinds of play can help us to navigate those changes? For example, exploring, that's a verb and that's a kind of play. It can help us navigate the way forward, find new inspiration, whether that's intellectual or physical. Or storytelling, another verb that is a kind of play for a lot of people. How can we craft stories of the change? How can we build connections across the organization, either through crafting and telling stories or by absorbing those? How about directing? Another kind of key play preference, my own personal one, so I'm biased, but it's all around kind of bringing ideas to life, organizing people, a bit like a composer with an orchestra, bringing those people together to create something. That's the directing preference in play. So that's just a little flavor of how we think about play, but I think just starting to think about verbs can be a helpful entry point for many of us who might not have thought about play for a while. So in summary, there's no shortage of work and change. So how can we help people love it more? And we think that's through more play and more creativity.
So kind of going back to the top, our perspective is that everyone is creative, but not all creativity is currently recognised and valued. And it's also time to rethink play and work, because it's a compelling way to unlock everyday adaptability, as well as those breakthrough innovation moments that are needed to kind of thrive through change. And I hope that this kind of short taster has kind of tempted you to celebrate all types of creativity and create a play-filled environment in your workplace. But you might be thinking, well, that sounds great in theory, but tell me how. And we always suggest that, start small and start where you are. And we suggest like a curious conversation with your team, and suggest you could ask these 3 simple questions. For example, are you creative? And how? When are you at your most imaginative? And what does play look like for you? We touched on what the benefits of play and creativity are at an organizational level, about engaging people, driving innovation and helping them thrive. But we think by just having that curious conversation with your team, that you'll gain new insights into what makes the people you work with tick, so that you can engage with them better. We also believe that will help you form new connections, and new ideas will form by just exploring these topics in an open way and seeing what emerges.
So a very short anecdote just to wrap us up today. So in my previous life at BlackRock, I was very motivated. I was hungry. I wanted to perform well, but I was not deemed creative by myself or by anyone else. And that was fine. That was just accepted. It wasn't even a topic for discussion because all the creative stuff happened in its own department. But since tapping into play, learning about its benefits, understanding how I like to play, what that means I can bring to my work, and being on my own journey, I suppose, and I'm still really at the beginning of it, I now know my play preferences and how that can unlock my own form of creativity. And as I mentioned, one of my top preferences is directing, so bringing ideas to life. So that means play for me, which might look like work to others, is planning, project managing, bringing people together, building momentum, finding a way over hurdles. Now, that's not typically creative or artistic, but play for me is bringing new ideas into the world, which is a form of creativity. And I can't think of any organizations that wouldn't benefit from people who love to play in that way. And sometimes I wonder if I had been asked how I like to play or how I might express my own creativity, or even if a conversation was just invited around these topics, what might have been? Maybe I wouldn't be sitting here with you today speaking about Playfield. So thank you so much for your kind attention and time today, everyone. It's been such a pleasure sharing a little snapshot with you. What we'd like to invite you to do, if you'd like to join in breakouts, is just reflect on these questions here. Does your organization value all types of creativity? And how do you think about play?
Or not? Or do you just see it as it is? Which is a good question. So yeah, let's start with that one, if I may.
Yeah, that's a great question. Should I take it first, P?
Yeah, go for it.
Fill in my inevitable gaps. Thank you for the question, Rachel. It's a brilliant one. I would certainly say there's no kind of right or wrong way to approach the conversation. So wherever feels natural would be the first thing I'd say. In our experience, the leap, but to start even thinking about play as an adult can be quite a leap for some people, because we're kind of told it's for children. And so we kind of put it on a shelf, don't we, when we become an adult, and it's sort of not for us. So to even start thinking about play as an adult, it can sometimes feel more familiar to start thinking about it outside of work, because that's where we think play belongs. You know, it belongs in our free time, in our hobbies, that's our play. So it can often be not quite such a leap to start thinking about what you like doing outside of work, what's play to you outside of work. Whereas what's play for you in work can sometimes be a bit of a journey to take people on. So that's probably my 101 to start with, is it can often be a more accessible point to start thinking about it outside of work. And when they're kind of comfortable sharing that with you, with others, to then start turning the conversation as to, okay, well, you like those verbs outside of work. Do we have any of those in our work? And then to shift the conversation that way. But whatever kind of comes naturally, I suppose it's kind of down to the individuals you're speaking with and how open they are to even the idea of sharing what play is for them. P, would you add anything to that?
No, sounds perfect.
Thank you.
What's your instinct, Rachel? What would you use? What do you think's best?
You know what, having just had our breakout conversation and reflecting about it yourself, I now completely see what you're saying about it's sometimes easier to think about yourself outside of work and then how that applies in work. So yeah, that insight you've just shared makes a lot of sense. You can always bring the conversation back around to a different context, can't you?
Please do raise your hand for another question. And Rachel, thank you. Andrew, I can't resist turning to you after your messages in chat, which I loved. Have you used play at work a lot? And are you really at a beach?
I haven't. Richard. I don't know. You know, like, no, I'm never ever playful at work. I'm like, there's everything about this conversation that I love. You know how hard it's been for me to kind of make one of these calls and find the time in my diary, but I was telling the group that I clearly just saw the word playful and it was like a magnet, you know, a magpie to a shiny object. I was like, oh, you know, like I can go and play with people that might like to play with me. So yes, I am very playful. Definitely the being introduced to the label of Joker I was like, yeah, hat fits. And I think it's really important. I think, you know, the HR teams, if I look at the teams that I've led over the course of this pandemic, oh my gosh, you know, we've really needed to lighten the load, you know, at work. And I think sometimes the pressure of, I work in a tech industry, and the pressure of performance, the performance focus is real and it's live. And I really loved the link with safety and how, you know, the pressure of performance essentially almost drives the opposite, because, you know, it's very real that you can create cultures where there's just not enough psychological safety to innovate. And so I often have to tame my humour, because I think sometimes it's my best asset but my Achilles heel as well. I'm like, I wonder if some people take me seriously at all. And I think it takes a while for the leaders that I work with to kind of understand that there's a toughness to the results that I expect and that I will be shooting for, but it's delivered with, you know, sunglasses and a hat, you know. So it probably is quite confusing to work with me, to be honest, but really good fun.
Oh, Andrea, I wondered, I'm absolutely fascinated. It's so lovely to meet a leader who's so in touch with their own sense of play. It's a real breath of fresh air to see that. And I'm curious, if I'm allowed to ask a question in the Q&A, when you think about your team, do you find that you think you all like to play together the same way, or do you think maybe like this conversation there are different play preferences?
No, I was admitting in the Q&A that clearly I wonder how far my, you know, desire for play borders on bullying. You know, it's just like no option other than to be swept up in the craziness sometimes. But that was with a team I knew really well. I can remember playing a game just before the pandemic with my team at Christmas, which was that, I don't know if any of you've got it, the Don't Get Got game. If not, I thoroughly recommend it on Amazon and other good retailers. But we were playing it in a management meeting, which was basically the ability to lie to one another and get away with it. And it was the first day of one of my teams, one of the new directors of my team, this is his first day on the job. And I reflected afterwards, God, that was a really hard onboarding experience for him, but, you know, probably got the measure of the team. Now I've got a new job. I've joined a new job in a pandemic. It's got lots of Europeans who, you know, and I am totally taming my my craziness, and it's hard work. I'm really having to work hard on my situational leadership to keep inside you know, the degree of crazy that's going on, so that I find a way of not terrifying them in the process, or find a way for this new team to have fun and to establish the boundaries of fun, actually. And it's really draining for me, holding some of that back, and just then figuring out where I can do it, and where is the right place for it. So what I've loved about today's conversation is you've given me about 8 other labels that now I can explore a little bit more, and maybe find some other outlets while I'm balancing my Joker, maybe getting on with a bit more directing, maybe.
Thank you for sharing that reflection. Thank you.
Nice point in the chat, Nancy. Absolutely. Andrew, just sorry, stay with you briefly. Do you think are different cultures more responsive to play than others?
Oh gosh, I mean, this is dreadful. I mean, I'd love other people's opinions, but yes, I mean, it would be my answer. I mean, I mean, I've got my Southern European team members are very mischievous. Some of my Nordic team members, I'm finding you know, I think everyone has their own version of play, but it just plays out. I've never used the word play so much in all my life. It just plays out differently in each culture. You know, like I can have a good giggle with, you know, the team from the Nordics, but it's slightly different and a bit more reserved than perhaps, you know, my team members in Portugal or Spain. That's, you know, but I guess the one thing that is true is that plays, you know, everyone plays.
Yeah, that's it. I think that you just reflected something really lovely there. I wanted to pick up on around seeing someone be playful, you know, exhibiting laughter, being you know, playing pranks. We think that's play, and that is for some people. But also, you could find someone completely lost, you know, on their laptop, not talking to anyone, completely losing sense of time, and they can be at play. They can be having that same sense of flow and creativity, but it doesn't look playful to me walking past their desk. And it's just this idea of widening that field of what play is for people, what it feels like. And it doesn't need to look like one thing, doesn't it? I find it exciting to think, how can we broaden that field and that understanding?
And I think to build on that, another reflection was that across cultures, just the verbs and talking about it in terms of that, we've seen that it can create a language which is common, which is human. So whilst the degrees and preferences might shift by cultures, as you say, everyone likes to play, but that kind of common connection of, yeah, I love exploring too, this is how I explore, how do you explore, and what's it look and feel like for you and your culture, can be a really lovely opening way to kind of build bridges as well.
I like Rachel's point about the psychologically safe as well. But springing off from that, Suki and Pauline, what's your feeling about the degrees of confidence that people might have in terms of being able to play? How would you boost people's confidence? Is there a way into encouraging that safety, if you like?
Shall I kick off? And then, well, I think play is voluntary, and I do think as adults there might be different things happening. There's the point of the individual and whether they give themselves permission to play, and whether they themselves feel like it's appropriate, it's for adults, and you know, the ways of play that they have. And then there's also the group dynamics, I guess, in terms of how it's framed, and the container for play in terms of will be more or less safe. I think we kind of start with the way in terms of just going back to kind of introducing the word and saying, well, what do people think about this word? What's the role of it? Let's share stories of play. And then we think that grounding work is really important to kind of, because people are coming from different places. So some people are very naturally in touch with their play, and other people it's a rethink, reconnection. So it's about leveling the playing field. And then from that place, inviting people to play in different ways. Because often we think there's loads of play experiences going on potentially within a workplace, but whether we actually understand how people like to play in a group before we start the play experience, we don't think that necessarily happens. We haven't really seen that. And that's what we would kind of say is the way in. Firstly, what is play? How do we like to play as a group? And then do the play. So, yeah.
Pauline, do you find that people actually know how they like to play? Because I'm wondering if you ask some of those questions, they might not actually know.
Yes, so I guess we've built we've built some processes and methodology around helping people reconnect with what that is, in terms of using those archetypes and getting them to reconnect with those, think about it in a social context first. Zuki, anything to add on that? I guess that's kind of what the work we do in part.
No, that you did it beautifully. Diagnostic tool is how we do that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we come to 12:45, so I promise you a half finished, which seems a real shame. So just taking my point to Nancy there about organising play dates, I thought that's what I did for a living. So we'll have another one soon. And I'd like to say a big thank you to Pauline, to Zuki for taking us through today. It was just absolutely fantastic. An extra thank you to Andrea for a small yellow hat and massive sunglasses. You're going to be on the end of a wave of job applications, I suspect. Thank you. Thank you all ever so much. We'll see you at another one soon.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll send out the slides too.
Such a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.